This show is brought to you by the Garden Gurus and Evergreen Garden Care. Evergreen Garden Care and their market-leading brands are some of the most trusted consumer brands within the garden care market. They produce high-quality garden care products designed to help people create their own green oasis. Whether it's a garden, a balcony, or potted indoor plants, they want to inspire anyone, anywhere to be able to easily create and maintain their own garden. To find out more about Evergreen Garden Care, head to www.lovethegarden.com. Garden Express are Australia's leading mail-order gardening service, offering a wide range of quality garden products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show you jump online and visit their website.
Hello and welcome to the Garden Gurus Live. I'm Darren Seinor.
And I'm Joanne Harris, and we're excited to be here this morning. We're filling in for Trevor.
We have a great show for you today. Here's what's coming up. Do you have any orchids? Well, Trevor earlier this week caught up with Steven Chedid to share some great tips on growing orchids.
And I'm here and I'm going to show you some favourite plants of mine that you can purchase at this time of the year.
And Garden Express will share their awesome offer with you for this week.
If you've got any gardening questions or queries, post them in the comments. Remember to include your suburb and the state when you're asking questions, and make sure that you hit the like button for us. We've also got some great giveaways and prizes this week. Post your questions in the comments for your chance to win.
There's been a lot of questions sent through over the week. Firstly, we've got Michael from Kilmore. He's got a rosemary bush and he's wondering what soil to plant it in and what he should fertilise it with. Well, can't get anything easier to grow than rosemary, can you, Joe?
No,
so
hardly need fertiliser.
Just as long as the soil is free draining, nice sunny spot, and yeah, as Joe said, you barely need to fertilise them.
Yeah. Wendy, and we're not sure where Wendy's from, but she's got some weeds, and it probably doesn't matter where she comes from, in fact, because weeds are weeds in any garden, and she's got lots of animals around, so she doesn't want to use any chemicals, and wants to know what she can use. Well, first thing that comes to mind for me is steam.
Yep, steam's quite effective.
Kettle. Use your kettle. Go out and use that. Or there's also a product on the market that you can find in most garden centres now, and it's a and I'm reading this because I never remember it, non-anonic acid, and that will, the one thing with that though is you can't use it when the garden is wet, and also with your animals. If your garden or the plant is wet, don't let your animals around. But as soon as it's dry, it's fine. So
it's very, very safe to use around animals.
Absolutely.
Velusta in Canberra has a struggling magnolia. It's dripping brown-tipped leaves. That doesn't sound great. She's had it in a large pot for 18 months and wonders what the issue could be. She also has other plants growing in the same pot. Well, probably it's root bound, might need to be taken out of the pot. Magnolias, like a lot of plants, when they're in pots, don't really like extra plants in there with the root competition. I'd make sure the pot's draining well and probably look at repotting it. Nice, good quality premium potting mix, slightly bigger pot. And now we're coming into the warmer weather. It should take off. The only possibility, probable problem it will also have maybe a fungus. So all-purpose systemic insecticide, fungicide will help out with that.
And I think when you see brown on the tips of leaves, that's often it shows you that it's an overwatering or
the potting mix is saying soggy.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Or you've the hole in the bottom of the pot has filled up with roots or something. So that's a really important thing just to check on. So Sharon's from Lennox Head, and we're heading into a new area with very red soil. How can we prepare the soil to plant vegetables? Well, I think if you're going to plant vegetables anywhere, perhaps even in very red soil, it's really important, is some good compost. So there must be, in Lennox Head, there must be a great place to buy some good compost.
Yeah, it's probably clayey soil, so trying to get it to drain well is really important, and maybe a little bit of gypsum.
You'd need some gypsum to help that also. And, of course, some good mulch.
Yep.
Always get good mulch on your soil. That'll help bring in the worms and everything else for
And
it.
maybe slightly raise the beds up a bit so the drainage is good, especially for those annual vegetables that are a bit prone to root rot problems.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
Kang
definitely.
in Perth desperately needs help with his red dragon fruit plants. They seem to be continuously affected by a horrible fungal rot. Well, dragon fruits plants do get attacked by various types of fungus. Liquid copper generally will fix that problem up. But the thing with fungicides, you do need to try and vary them when you use them, so you're not using the same fungicide all the time. Because if you do that, eventually what you'll do is breed up a resistant population of fungus. So a variety of different fungicides, and make sure you've got good air movement around the dragon fruits. That's really important with them. Otherwise, they're pretty easy to grow.
They are, aren't they? Yeah.
And stunning fruit.
Stunning fruit. That's what I was going to say. So Mika from Melbourne has a 1-year-old avocado tree that's been grown from seed. Please help. I'm in Melbourne and the leaves are turning yellow and a slow grower. What is the best fertilizer to use for avocado trees? I like a mineral fertilizer. The slow grower, I'm not sure that you can get it growing any faster other than some good fertilizer.
Yeah, particularly in Melbourne. The main thing, a lot of Melbourne has heavy soil, so just making sure it's got free drainage, because they are super susceptible to root rot issues, and it won't start growing out until the warm weather anyhow, which in Melbourne's probably a week in December, isn't
it? Maybe 2. Maybe 2. Also, grown from seed, it's going to be a long time before it gets to fruiting, so you really have to make sure you look after this well. And as Darren said, it needs really good, well-draining soil. You might find that it gets a few yellow leaves, especially in Melbourne. I wouldn't be too concerned about that as long as you've got some good fertilizer on it.
Yeah, hitting it up with fertilizer is the way to go.
Yeah. Do you have any orchids in your garden? Last week, Trev caught up with Steve Chedid from Love in the Garden to share some tips on growing your own orchids. So have a look at this.
So, Stephen, welcome to the show this morning. How are you going?
Good. How are you, Trevor?
Yeah, I'm very good, mate. Look, thank you very much for joining us. I did a story a couple of weeks ago on the Garden Gurus, which I'm sure you saw. One of the most common questions we're getting asked currently through our Facebook page and even direct emails to our website is about getting orchids into flower. Now, typically, most of the questions this time of the year would relate to Cymbidium orchids. So I did that little story about splitting them up. As soon as they finish flowering, split them up. You end up with 2 plants, more flowers. But of course, there's a lot of orchids in the world. In fact, the most prolific plant species on the planet is actually the orchid. And most people don't realize that there's more orchids on the planet, or more species of orchid, than any other plant genera.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really interesting. And of course, that then led to me doing that story and a whole bunch of people asking me, well, what about my Phalaenopsis orchid?
Yep.
Same problem you got, right? Look, the key with them, of course, is initially to getting them to grow strong and getting that root system established, which you've done. So you've got it growing. It looks lovely, dark green. You're doing the pour and feed?
Yep. So after watching your story, I repotted it. I used our orchid potting mix. So I started with the best potting mix I knew that it would love.
Yep.
And then I've been doing pour and feed every week.
Yep.
And then also mist and feed.
Yeah,
so I've been
terrific.
using all the right products to give it, the best start it can.
Yep.
But I'm just waiting for that little spike when it's going to flower.
And what there was one other element of the story that we did on the weekend that's vitally important, and that's light. So one of the interesting things is if you give them lots of nutrient and you keep them in the dark, they tend to, for whatever reason, they tend to put a lot of growth on, but not a lot of flower, which can be quite frustrating. And this is the Phalaenopsis, or the moth orchid, is one that's typically grown in a glass house, and they either have misting watering or they have flood irrigation watering. So the water comes in, is drawn into the soil, and then naturally flows out. But they're better to be kept on the dry, and they always have to be kept in a brightly lit spot.
Okay.
So the ideal scenario is to not have them exposed direct to the northern sun, because that's where you can get burnt. But ideally to have a sort of the perfect scenario would be to have a southeast position. So as the sun comes up in the morning, you've got a window ledge or something like that. So that's the thing I think with this you'll find is light. It's getting some more light to it.
Awesome. All right, I'll let it go.
You got a spot like that in the house?
Yes, definitely. Like that. Been keeping it probably more on the darker side. So I'll definitely move to a brighter spot. Yeah, so the dark's going to bring lots of foliage and big lush foliage like you've got there, which is perfectly good. Yeah. And to some extent, you know, like the trick is when you want to bring the flower on, move it into the brightly lit position, and now's the time to do it, because as the days get longer, so more daylight hours, that is a major trigger for these guys to go into flower. Whereas Cymbidium orchids, the trigger is actually the days getting shorter. Okay. So it's interesting how they're all different. Same family of plant, different genus, different species, but all members of the orchid family with very different triggers as to how they come into flower. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I've got another little project going on, which I'll update you maybe in a few months' time. But I saw on the old TikTok that if you put the aerial roots of a monstera in some water, then you're going to get all this brand new foliage. So I took that one step further, and I put my aerial roots in a bottle of Pour Feed. Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. It is very interesting. I've got some new leaves coming up. I don't know if that's from the Pour Feed or from, just, heading into spring and all that. So that'll be really interesting to see what happens. Yeah, well, so water is going to hydrate the plant, but of course, Pour and Feed with a good nutrient mix is the key to really getting good growth. So it's going to sustain it. Look, let's just quickly talk about Pour and Feed, because I'm not sure everybody fully understands what a great idea this is. It won Product of the Year, I believe, last year. Yes, it did. And no wonder, because this is a chance for you to get a fertilizer without risking burning your plants. And indoor plants can't afford to have any burn. So the trick is to get the right mix of nutrients. And that's where a lot of people kind of, they make mistakes and they'd end up setting their plants back. But Pour and Feed solves that problem, doesn't it? Exactly. We've taken all the guesswork out. We've pre-mixed it. It's already in the bottle. It's got the perfect NPK balance that your plants need. This one's perfect for orchids. We've put trace elements, growth stimulants. Literally, it is gold bottle for your plants. Yep. And that little cap that's on the top, when you unscrew it, that's what you fill up to pour in, and that's the perfect amount you pour in. Exactly. All pre-measured. Use one little cap, and your plants are going to be thriving in no time. Good idea, mate. You can't go wrong. Pour and Feed. Now there's Pour and Feed for orchids. But there's Pour and Feed for other plants as well, right? Other groups of plants. Yeah, there's Pour and Feed for indoor plants and Pour and Feed for cacti and succulents. All right. So that way you cannot go wrong. Steven, thank you so much for joining us again this morning. And what a great idea. I hope I helped you with your orchid. Yeah. And maybe that just explains the difference between Phalaenopsis and the fact that they need to have longer daylight hours and brightly lit positions. And right at the moment, your Cymbidium orchids, well, they've finished flowering. You can keep them in a shaded position until February when you move them out. And then again, as the days are getting shorter, that will trigger the flowering process. Perfect. I'll definitely be doing that. All right, mate. Thanks so much for joining us again this morning. Thanks so much, Trevor.
So how was that? I hope you're enjoying the show today. If you are, hit the like button, let us know. We've had plenty of questions flying through, so Joe, I reckon we better get right back to them. Samantha in Mount Gambier in South Australia. She has a nectarine tree that the fruit was so terrible last year that not even the birds are eating it. Must be pretty ordinary. So she's been putting dynamic lifter on it. Well, I think, Samantha, what you might need to do is look at your fertilizer regime and get a more complete fruit tree type fertilizer, something with trace elements and all those extra things that they need that they won't get from a chicken manure fertilizer. And make sure you're giving them plenty of water when they're setting the fruit and carrying the fruit. So at least twice a week and a nice deep water, and keep them well mulched. And hopefully the fruit quality will improve after that. And Then you can feed them to the birds.
Yeah, and Darren, I think it could even be like what they call sour fruit.
Yep.
Which is exactly what it is, sour fruit. And if you don't follow Darren's advice on that twice a week and consistency, they're like children, they like consistency.
They do.
So if you do a consistent watering and a consistent fertilizer regime of an all-purpose fertilizer for fruit, you should have much better fruit next year.
I hope so.
And then you'll be fighting the birds.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so Carol, and we're not sure where Carol's from. No, sorry, I'm gone Callie. I've jumped a spot. Callie from Valentine in New South Wales, she's got a beautiful goldfish plant that's been growing in a pot for about a year or two, and she'd like to transfer it into a flower bed. And can I do this? It's always been outside, and it's been growing in the sun, and it's been growing very well in a pot. Usually goldfish plants are grown in pots. They're not often grown in the ground. And given that you're in New South Wales, I'm going to assume that you're in a heavier soil. So again, you're going to want to make sure that it's well-drained soil. I would be concerned about putting it into an area where maybe there was too much wind, because the cold wind, even the hot wind, is going to damage it. So put it into a sheltered position, and it should go okay. I have seen them growing in the ground, and they look pretty good. But they have to be well looked after.
Yeah,
so good luck with that, Kelly. Yeah.
Don't see them around that much anymore, though.
No, so they're harder to get.
Carol from Unknown has 2 teddy bear magnolias. One has got brown spots on all of the leaves, and then all the leaves fell off, which is not what you want them to do. And now the same thing is happening with the second. She wants ideas to stop that from getting worse. She waters it once a week, uses sea salt and it's fertilised with a rose fertilizer. They may need a little bit more water, so you need to check the soil. Even coming out of winter, I'd still be checking the soil to make sure the water's getting in and it's soaking in really well in around the root system. They're quite shallow rooted, so just to scratch around and see what that's like. May need a wetting agent. I'll be using a more complete fertilizer for evergreen shrubs. And I'd also be a little bit worried that they do have a fungal issue, so a spray with a broad spectrum fungicide, a couple of sprays, and then mulch them really well. And hopefully once we come into the warm weather, they'll start to shoot away. They are pretty hardy, and they will take a bit of knocking around, but keep them well watered, wetting agent, fertilizer, and mulch, and a bit of fungicide. Fingers crossed, because the teddy bear's a beautiful magnolia. Hopefully it'll come back for you and look beautiful by Christmas.
The teddy bear magnolia is supposed to be quite a small one too, though. It's quite interesting. In Perth, it will grow much taller than what they say on the label. So you have to be a bit careful with that.
A few very, very tall ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for me, the key in this question is the brown spots.
Yeah.
So it probably indicates that you've got some sort of fungal issue with it. And just make sure if it's a brown spot with a yellow ring around it, then you're possibly bacterial, but it's more likely to be fungal.
I have seen them before.
But persevere, because they're fabulous plants.
And they do come
I
back
love them.
pretty well.
Yeah. So Rebecca's in Melbourne, and she's got 3 new hibiscus plants that she's planted around about 3 weeks ago, and they're looking sad. And what can she do with it? Well, these have probably been grown in controlled conditions in the nursery, and I would think that in Melbourne you're still experiencing some cold weather. I'd be careful about that. They're probably sad from the cold, and there's probably not a lot you can do. You maybe have planted them a little bit early. Again, I would maybe cover those, put a protection around them for the cold wind, and they should come away. Make sure there's some good mulch on the soil too, so that they have protection to their roots, because I think they're relatively shallow rooted too, aren't they?
Yeah, and they do really like the hot weather.
Yeah.
And Tyson in Baronia, also in Victoria, he wants to know where to buy custard apples. Well, Tyson, I'm not exactly sure. I don't do a lot of shopping in Victoria, so you may have to look around, see if you can find a local specialist in exotic fruits. There are online forums for exotic fruit growers, and they may be able to recommend a grower for you. But mostly, on the east coast, mostly the custard apples are grown in Queensland and northern New South Wales, so you might be able to find somewhere that could send you one or something like that, but you just have to have a hunt around. They tend to be, in the cooler climates, more of a specialist thing than something you'll get at your local garden centre.
Yeah, but give it a go, Tyson. It'd be great to see if it grew in Melbourne.
I think if you got the right variety, it would do okay for them, and you would get fruit, and they're quite a nice tree when they're growing.
Yeah, excellent. So Teresa on the Mornington Peninsula, we're getting lots of questions from Melbourne today, which is great. I have these bugs on my citrus tree, and I've tried white oil, soapy water, but they keep coming back. What can I do? Well, the bugs are most likely aphids.
More than likely.
More than likely aphids. Perhaps they're scale, because that's another thing that citrus can get. A horticultural oil is a good thing to do. And I think what happens is sometimes people, it's like with any pest, they'll put the white oil or the pesticide onto the tree once.
Yep.
And not think about, these things have a life cycle. So, you know, certain things, it might be a 14-day life cycle. So you need to do the spray at the beginning when you first see it, and then within another 14 days to capture any of those, the babies that are coming through.
Yep,
also.
you do have to be consistent.
So I would look at that. What can you do to keep them away? There's not a lot to do. You could maybe spray your neighbour's trees also. They may have it, and it might be coming in from there. But keep your tree healthy. You know, it's like us. If we're low ed and we're not sleeping well and not eating well, we're going to pick up all the pests and diseases.
Well fed and well watered.
Plants are the same thing, absolutely, and a little more often.
Yep,
is best for citrus too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Vanessa on the south coast of New South Wales has asked, how far should I trim my passion fruit vine back? Like, you can prune them up to half because they do flower and fruit on the new growth. It's starting to get a little bit too late for doing. Normally we do them in Perth in August, but I definitely, if it needs pruning, do it as soon as you possibly can, up to half, fertilise and mulch, and keep them well watered during the hot months, and they do come back extremely quickly. They're very vigorous growing passion fruit vines. So still, even though it's a little bit later than I normally do it, I'd definitely give it a go and get into it, and because otherwise you just end up with a Trifid taking over your entire backyard.
But great giving plants.
They are. They're fantastic.
They're fabulous giving plants. So Jan in Kalamunda, she has a running postman which has seed pods on it, and she tried to propagate them last year but wasn't successful. What's the best way, please? And wants to grow it out on on her verge. Well, I've always found it hard to propagate this from seeds also. Not that I've done a lot with a running postman, but I've found it much easier to actually allow roots to set on
layer them.
Layer them. That's it. I'm guessing is it scarified?
Yeah, they probably need to be scarified. But some of those native seeds do need to, just on a little bit of sandpaper or some hot water treatment. It's probably something, if you Googled it, you'll be able to find the best way to scarify them.
Yeah.
And that once you do that little scarification on them, and they do tend to germinate really rapidly because they are basically just a pea, and they'll pop up like mad.
Yeah. But it'll look fantastic too. Your verge is going to look great.
1,000 square metres, that's a big verge.
That's a huge verge. Must be on a corner maybe. Yeah.
Okay, so have you been watching this season of the Garden Gurus? Well, we're back with another episode this week. So take a look now at a promo clip for the upcoming episodes.
Here's a handy tip for you that I'll be sharing this weekend on the Garden Gurus. When you get out and do any maintenance, make sure you go around with a line trimmer before you do the mowing. Now, the number one benefit you have is, well, as you're going around with a mower, the catcher will be taking up any of the line trimmings, meaning that when you finish, the lawn will look magnificent and clean. No extra work to do. Make sure you check it out this weekend on the Garden Gurus.
So Jo, you've brought some absolutely great looking plants in with you today. How about telling us about them?
I have. Well, first one, let's start with gardening is not always about outside.
This is true.
It's also about the inside. And I've brought with me, I don't know if you can see that, I'll pull it right up close. It's an aspidistra. So aspidistras are generally something that's planted inside, although they can be planted outside in very shaded areas also. They're fantastic actually because you can use an aspidistra in just a vase of water as well. They shine up really nicely, and you can use them in your house when you haven't got a lot of flowers or plants to pick for your vase. This is a new one to Perth. It's not new. They come from Japan, China, Taiwan, that sort of area. And we're more likely to see in garden centres up until now just the plain green one or the variegated one, which has a variegated stripe through the leaf. This is a very spotty one, and it's a bit of a collector's item. So have a look for that. You'll see it around your garden centres. Yeah, easy to grow. Usually the leaf will grow about 50 centimetres by about 10 centimetres. Yeah, great to have inside. My understanding also, or rumour has it, that Oscar Wilde brought this plant into the house in his era, and he was the first one apparently to bring it in.
Sounds like an
rumour
Oscar
has
Wilde
it.
sort of thing to do.
And of course, that was when houses in the Victorian era were much. They were much darker than what we have them these days. And they worked really well. So if you've got a really dark spot in your house, perfect for that, and easy to grow. Easy to grow.
They are, they're beautiful.
So that's the first one. The next one I wanted to look at was the Midgenberry. So it's one of the Australian native foods, and I think edibles have become a huge part of the nursery industry recently. Everybody wants to grow edibles, which is fabulous, and there's a big range of Australian native foods out there. The Midgenberry is a really pretty one. It grows between 50 centimetres and a metre tall and about 1.5 wide, although you can bring it in. I've seen in one garden they actually had it hedged.
Yeah, I've got a client that's got one hedged, and they're just a beautiful little plant.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And the berry, the new growth, I don't know if you can see it, but the new growth comes out quite bronzy red colour. And the berries are little star-like white flowers. So it's a really pretty little plant too. And it's got the berries on it are white, creamy white, with a purple speckle on them. I think they taste like, and people say they taste like a bit like a blueberry. So they're sort of sweet but a bit tart at the same time. Perfect little garden plant. Likes a well-drained soil. For those of you that are watching up in northern New South Wales, Queensland, they grow really well on the edges of the tropical forests and things too. So they'll take a bit of moisture, and once established, they're quite drought tolerant.
They're great in pots too, in big pots.
Yeah, they would be. Pots. Yeah, they would be really nice, especially with the new growth, with this colour coming in too. Yeah, so get out there. Now, one thing I did bring along with you, not everybody has a large garden that can grow all the edibles that they want and to use, but there is this wonderful product that's being produced that is the dried herbs. And so if you can't grow all of them, have a look in your garden centre and pick up some of the dried herbs from that Australian native bush food. Okay. So I also bought in the silver box, which is a Tucrium. The bush germander was the original of them, and it's actually a native of Australia. But this is a hybrid of that, and it's called silver box. It's a more upright plant. Again, it's fabulous as a hedge or just spotted through the garden for that grey accent. If any of you have heard me on here before on radio, grey plants are one of my favourites. I love them. And they're usually, grey plants are really drought tolerant as well.
Good coastal plants too.
Fabulous coastal plants. It'll take salt. This one will take the salt. It flowers from autumn through to spring, so you've got a nice long flowering time. And at that time when a lot of things aren't flowering, especially if you've got lots of deciduous trees and things in your garden, this will draw your eye back down to the lower areas where you'll get flowers all year round. Sorry, not all year round, right through the winter time.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I love that one. It's such an easy one to grow. If you're growing it in a hedge or even just singularly, if you cut it and at least slash it back by half, and it will keep that nice, tight, compact look too. Yeah, I really like that one. So one of the other plants I've bought in, and it's got very few flowers on it, I'm sorry. So Darren might like to hold that up so you can see the colour of the flower. This is an osteospermum, and I always thought osteospermums were granny plants, and I had a real thing about them that I didn't bring many into the garden centre for a long time. We'd bring a few in, but not many. We didn't promote them, but they're a fantastic plant. I love them.
This is a beautiful looking colour.
It's wonderful. So it's got white petals on the outside and it's got like a pom-pom of purple on the inside. Unfortunately, this one finished flowering, so I've taken all the flowers off. But Google it or have a look at the label here, and it's really good. These are so drought tolerant. You can grow them anywhere. My neighbour's got them on her retaining wall, and they flow over. They just droop everywhere, and they're just full of flower all the time.
And they look best mass planted.
Mass planted, absolutely. But there's so many different colours of osteospermums too. I couldn't resist. I went over the 5 and I bought in another one just for you to see. This one, you really have to Google it too. It's orange with this purple. It's like some little garden fairy has gone through and hand painted the inside of all the flowers. They're so beautiful. You know, these can be used not just in your garden. They grow well in pots, but hanging baskets. They look fantastic. So if you've got that really hot area in your garden that nothing grows, maybe under a pergola or something, or on the edge of a pergola where it's really hot, they'll grow particularly well for you. And they flower from spring right through to autumn. So you get spot flowering all the way through that really hot time of the year also. Yeah, I love them.
Yep, gorgeous.
Okay, so the last one I bought in, and I just have to stretch right over here, is a coprosma. Again, this is an old-fashioned plant, the old mirror plant. And there's a bunch of new cultivars come out. And this one's called Sahara Ruby. So it's green and almost black on the inside with a deep red on the outside. And as the weather changes, it changes colour. You get more vibrancy, you get more green and darker colours in the cooler temperature. And as it gets hotter, you get the hotter colours coming through.
Yeah, very useful plant, coprosma. It's very hardy.
Yeah. Now, I've seen them growing in Guildford. That's where my garden centre is. And I've seen them growing in Guildford, and we have very heavy clay. And yet they grow quite well there. And I always thought they had to grow in a well-drained soil. But, you know, I think they'll grow well in clay. You might have to put a bit of gypsum in the soil and keep it a bit open. But I have seen them growing well.
I reckon they'll grow just about everywhere, Jo.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Jo. Those are some great plants, some really interesting ones in there. Now, one of my favourite plants is the spider lily, and Trev had a chat with David from Garden Express about these beautiful plants. Let's have a look at
David Van Berkel joining us this morning. I'm very excited, David, because every single time we chat, you've got something new, something different, or something spectacular to go in the garden. And today you hit the mark on all 3 of those, because we are talking about a plant that you have called spider lily, but I have always known as the sacred lily of the Incas. It's absolutely beautiful. Hymenocallis vestalis.
Yes, good morning, Trev. It's been a very interesting week, and indeed, Hymenocallis, sacred lily of the Incas, or spider lily is our short-term name for it.
Yeah.
And just another one of those really interesting stories, Trevor. We couldn't harvest one last year. We had a small crop left over. I've been getting some from a couple of growers. They're not doing it anymore. And this last guy's been hiding them. Him and his dad have been flower growers for about 50 years. And they've decided to harvest their entire crop and they're going to replace it with something else as they wind down their business a little bit. So I'm picking up about 30,000 of these spider lilies. I know, and that will give me a few years of cropping, right? We'll plant that over 4 years of supply and rotate the crop through. But that does present our customers with a bargain. And I'm just going to pick one up for you, Trevor.
Oh, look at the size of those.
Yeah, they're quite
huge.
Aren't they?
Yeah, that's a massive bulb for Hymenocallis vestalis, the sacred lily of the Incas, or the spider lily. How good's that? Now, they're going to produce flowers basically as soon as summer comes along.
Oh, exactly. I wouldn't be surprised if there's up to 5 stems of blooms in each of those bulbs, Trevor. They're just magic. As I said, been grown for cut flowers. So they've been in the ground probably at least 4 years, I would say. And so we're just going to pick the biggest and the best, put them together as a 3-pack at a really good deal.
Right. So tell me, what is the deal? Because there's 3 per packet. That's going to be a big packet in itself, because look at the size of those bulbs.
I'm probably going to do my dough on shipping with Australia Post. We've all heard of their dramas, right?
Yeah.
So, but like twice the size bulb that we would normally ship. And we're going to take 30% off, Trev, and that'll bring the price down to $7.50 for 3 amazing spider lily bulbs.
What? That's incredible. This is one of the most beautiful flowers you can ever get. And for folks, if you're not sure about this one, where you might have seen it, if you've ever been to the tropics, it's often used in places like Singapore, and they'll do mass, verge gardens or medium strip gardens, because it's an indestructible repeat flowering bulb. It will just flower through the summer months. Each stem produces multiple little individual flowers, and they just keep popping up, don't they?
Yeah, look, and I'm sure there's a giant form, because I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, Queensland, all the tropics, you see these beautiful big versions of them. The foliage is quite firm, strong, disease resistant, all of those wonderful things. So yeah, I'm in love with them. I think they're a beautiful flower, and just a really delicate looking flower, but an easy to grow bulb.
Yeah, and look, it'll perform in full sun, but it'll handle sort of dappled semi-shade quite well without any problems, and continue to flower. Foliage is probably a little bit like a more compact form of Agapanthus in a way, but one of the most magnificent plants. And from a West Australian garden point of view, knowing how hot and dry it gets over here, this is one that doesn't require a lot of water either once it's established. Yeah,
it's just so versatile, Trevor. And the beautiful thing with these bulbs is, for the customers this year, the multiplication rate, the babies and the pups that these big bulbs are going to provide, a year or two in the garden, you're going to have this beautiful clump from each of those bulbs, and just more and more blooms every year. So versatile, hardy, simple.
Sensational, mate. Another amazing deal from Garden Express. Now, for people to order them, they just go straight to the website?
Yes, we'll put a banner up for these ones as well, www.gardenexpress.com.au.
All right, and not just that, but when they jump on board, they place their order. A couple of weeks down the line, there's going to be a pleasant little surprise arrive in the mail, a lovely little package, something to put into your garden when you've got time.
Probably one of those bigger boxes this time, Trevor, to fit these ones in.
They're massive.
Grab yourself a couple of packs. This is probably the bargain of a while, and just one of the benefits of one of these growers deciding that that's it. They've had enough of this product, and we get 1 year where we get a good stab at it.
Okay, just to repeat it. Show us those bulbs, David. Spider lilies, the sacred lily of the Incas. There's 3 of them for $7.50. Look at the size of those bulbs. That's amazing value. Well done.
Happy days. Happy days.
Good on you, mate. Thanks, David. Have a great day.
Yeah, cheers, Trevor. You too.
Okay, well, let's head straight into some more questions. But remember, if you're enjoying the show, give us a like. So, straight into it. Michael, he's also from the unknown. He's got a rosemary bush. What's the best soil and fertilizer to use? And should he use sugarcane mulch? Not sure that you really need to use mulch on a rosemary, Michael. But if you do, sugarcane probably wouldn't be a bad one to use, although I'd probably prefer to use something a little bit chunkier so that you've got more well-drained soil. I think sugarcane will hold the moisture a bit much into it for rosemary, a bit damp. Yeah, I think so too. And as far as soil fertilizer, I always prefer a mineral fertilizer. So you'll find one in your unknown area at some unknown garden centre.
Well, they're not fussy either.
No,
they don't need a lot.
Really.
Judy from Geelong's looking for an old-fashioned Daphne. They are a magnificent plant, and they're a lot more fussy to grow than a rosemary. Beautiful perfume. Yeah. The old-fashioned ones are still growing, and there are a few varieties named cultivars growing now, which sort of seem to have taken preference over the old Daphne Adora, but they are around.
Only because it's really hard to find the other one too. Well, not only reason, they are really beautiful plants, the new ones that are out, but it is hard to find a Daphne. But just ring around. You'll find a garden centre.
Particularly in Melbourne, there should be a garden centre that would carry. You may just have to order them in, but they're definitely still being grown. They've just sort of lost the preference over the newer varieties.
Yeah, absolutely. But keep going with them because they're fantastic. Just keep trying. Yeah. So Judy's from Geelong, and can you still?
That was
Sorry,
me.
that's you. Okay, so from Melbourne, we've got, is it Vipin or Vipin? And he has a small yard where he'd like to plant a fragrant magnolia that doesn't grow too wide. And he already has, or she already has, the black tulip and a felix. So I'm assuming that you're still wanting a deciduous magnolia. There's a couple that would go really well. I guess the cameo is small. It grows about 3 by 3. And it's also of the Solangia variety, so it's highly scented. And you had an idea of one also. What was that?
Lilia flora nigra. It's a nice
Yeah.
upright one, very similar to the Solangiana type flowers.
Right.
I've always found them a bit hardier and a bit stronger growing, the Solangianas, and still have a nice perfume.
Yeah.
So they can be an
Fabulous
option.
plant to grow.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can even grow those in Perth.
I've got one.
Yeah,
It
perfect.
does beautifully.
You've just got to keep it again out of that hot wind situation, and it'll grow well.
So Elizabeth in Sydney has got citrus in their original pots and wants to transplant them. They have heaps of buds and is a bit worried that might be a bit late in the year. Well, sort of established wisdom is once your plants are in flower or they're carrying fruits, not a great idea to transplant them. But if you need to and you want to, you can do it. You may get a bit of extra flower drop that you wouldn't normally if you kept them in the pots. But citrus are such heavy fruiters anyhow. Like if you really want to transplant them, I definitely would get them in the ground now before the weather gets too hot. Improve the soil, make sure it drains fairly well for the citrus, and then start a fertilizing regime on them, and they'll do really well. They're much happier in the ground as a general rule than in pots.
Yeah. I guess unless you bought one of the new dwarf varieties, even then you've got to have them in a decent sized pot, right?
Even those ones I find just much happier in the ground. So I like to spread those feeder roots out as far as they can.
Yeah. We always suggest that somebody use something, a vessel at least as wide as a half wine barrel, if not wider.
As a minimum,
As an absolute minimum, yeah. So Liz from Hampton in Victoria, she's got a geranium that just will not grow. It flowers for a while, then the leaves just keep dying off, and she's repotted and fertilized it. What else can she do? Well, I guess if they're dying off, there's 2 different reasons why they could die off. One would be overwatering and too much water.
Definitely.
Or one could also be that it's in a hot, drying position. So we're not sure which is happening for you, Liz, but have a look at it. If it's in a pot and it's it's dying off from being overwatered, then check that the soil isn't holding the moisture too much, that the hole at the bottom is
really
open.
Good drainage.
Really good drainage, and keep the pot up off the ground also.
Yeah, that can certainly help.
Yeah. Then I guess if it's dying off because it's getting too much wind, you just need to move your pot and see how it'll go. Don't over-fertilise your geranium either.
No, they don't need a lot.
They really don't need it, so don't over-fertilise one.
Okay, so Trish, another unknown, wants to know when her frangipani will start producing leaves. It's in a pot in full sun. It's just about time that the frangipanis will start pushing out their leaves. It depends where you are and how warm it is.
Yeah.
So they normally don't really start pushing out a lot of leaves in Perth till middle of October when we start getting some really consistent warm weather. You just have to be patient. They'll get there, but they do need the warm weather to really push out that fresh new growth.
Yeah. So Bridget's from Wanding in Victoria, and when she's asking a question of can she take magnolia cuttings, and when can you do this? I'm going to pass that one on to you.
Well, all magnolias are pretty much grown from cuttings. That's the standard way of doing. Some of the varieties will be grafted, but generally probably 95% of the magnolias cutting grown. You do them with the current season's growth that they're just about to put on. Right. Once that's hardened off in summer, you can take the cuttings of that hardened wood in summer, but they aren't super easy to propagate. So you do need to keep them misted and somewhere where the foliage is going to completely dry out. Really good quality propagating mix, and the professionals grow them with strike them with bottom heat. So the bottom heat encourages the root formation,
right?
And use a striking hormone, so a hardwood striking hormone, number 3.
So you're saying in Perth that we would do it midsummer then?
Mid to late summer, into autumn. Yep. So while that current new season growth, once it hardens off, and then it's ready to go.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks for doing that. You can take the next one too if you like.
Okay, Brianna in Mooney Ponds has a 4-year-old macadamia in a large self-watering pot. How will I get to flower? Well, they should be in flower now. It's a flowering period. It depends whether the macadamia is a grafted one or a seedling. Seedlings tend to take anywhere between 5 to 10 years before they have their first lot of flowers and fruit. Grafted one will normally, within 5 years, you'll get flowers. They need plenty of full sun. They need a good root run. So if it's in a self-watering pot, it needs to be quite a big one. They do grow into quite substantial trees, macadamias, and plenty of nice open sunny area. Good quality all-purpose fruit fertilizer.
Yes.
And they'll be fine. But if it's only 4 years old, it might just not be old enough to flower yet. But it'll get there.
Give it patience. It won't be long. So we're off to Lamb Island now, and Jenny was wondering if she can pot a bird of paradise plant. Currently, it's in the ground in full sun, and it's in red clay soil. Quite honestly, I would put any bird of paradise in a pot before I put it in the ground. Getting it out of the ground is probably going to be harder than planting it into a pot.
Especially in red clay soil. Where's Lamb Island, Joe?
I'm not sure. I'll pass that one on to you.
I have no idea.
But it really doesn't matter because the clay soil is the indicator that it's possibly a heavier soil.
Yep.
You might need a good rope and a four-wheel drive.
It depends how big they are. You've got to, when you dig bird of paradise, I've done a few, you've got to dig around them, down, and then try and get under them. And then break them up. Depends how big they are. You can get them out, and they do grow really well in pots, but nice big pots as well.
Absolutely.
Those keep them looking good.
They have fabulous roots. Would you also, if you're the home gardener, would you dig a trench around and down and put some water through that to loosen the soil a bit?
It can certainly help. Probably with the clay. I don't know how much it helps with clay. It certainly works with the sand because you can wash the sand away.
Yeah.
Hey,
Beautiful plants. It's
they
just
are
they are
super hardy. I actually use a lot of them in my landscape.
Do you?
They work really well.
Yeah.
We've got Imelda in Wetherill Park. She has a problem with her hippeastrum flowers. I always look forward to seeing these beautiful flowers, but every time I see them being eaten by something, they completely ruin the flowers, which is a shame because hippeastrums are magnificent when they're in flower.
Yeah.
I would say probably snails and slugs would be the most likely thing.
Yeah.
Caterpillars as well. You need to try and get out there with the torch at night and see if you can see what's eating them. I'd almost be certain that it's snails and slugs. They'd love them, and they come out and flower when the snails and slugs are super active. So whatever you do in your garden to control your snails and slugs, whether it's traps or baits or whatever, you'll need to do that with the hippeastrums. They only flower for a short period, and you wait all year for them, and you don't want
to make the most of
it,
don't you? Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be what I'll be doing. Get out at night with a torch, have a look, and see if you can see what they are, and then take suitable action against them.
You could also use there is a snail bait that you can use that is natural. So
the iron-based
one. You could put 2 or 3 pellets in that, which would help. Otherwise, I always grab the grandchildren. I pay them a cent a slug. A cent a slug. Yeah.
I've been making you pick up your own slugs at that rate.
I love it. Okay. So Kay is asking, how do we kill ryegrass, please? And she's got it in her lawn.
I don't know if there is a selective herbicide that'll take out ryegrass.
No, there's not. I think it's patience.
Yeah, you might have to hand dig that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if she goes into the local garden centre and have a look at the selective herbicides, there are plenty of them around, different types for lawns, and see if one of them does ryegrass. And you need to be pretty sure of what your grass is to make sure that it's also suitable for your type of turf and that it'll target that species you want to get rid of. Ryegrass can be a bit of a pain.
It's a hard one to do.
Yeah.
I think most of the selective herbicides at the moment that you are selling also will indicate whether you've got cooch or
buffaloes.
Yeah, buffalo.
Yeah.
So whether you've got a thin grass or a thick grass, and certainly the garden centre people will help you with that.
Hussein in Melbourne, I have a blueberry pot. It's starting to get new leaves, and a week after those leaves, they start dying. It did really well last year. Besides the pH of the soil, what could possibly be the reason, and can it be saved? Well, I'm hoping it can be saved, Hussein, but if it's in a pot it's shooting the leaves out and they're dying, sounds like the soil is too wet and it's not draining properly. Blueberries like to stay moist but not wet. They're very particular about their potting mix, so they like a premium quality, well drained, either acidic to neutral potting mix is fine. But that would be the first thing I'd be checking, is making sure that pot's draining really well. And just make sure you haven't built too much potting mix or even mulch or anything like that on top of the root system, because they're very have a lot of surface roots and they don't like having too much mulch and too much potting mix piled over the top of that root ball in the pots. So give that a go. You may need to pull it out of the pot and repot it into fresh potting mix, even into a smaller pot if possible. Give it some seaweed extract and that sort of thing to try and revive it and see how it goes.
There's some good blueberry fertilizers out there also that will maintain the pH for you. And perhaps check that when those leaves start coming out, the new leaves, if they've got a red tinge to them, it can mean it's too cold and too wet.
Yes, definitely.
So if you see that, that'll be the indicator for you, Hussein. Good luck with that, because it's certainly worth having some blueberries in your garden. Jo from Mornington Peninsula, she's moving house soon. Good luck with that, Jo. Hope it goes well. And she has a beautiful Boronia that she wants to take with me. Is it possible to pop it in a pot? I don't think so.
No,
They're really hard to grow anyway. I would actually gift that to your next, the next resident of your house, and pop down to the garden centre and buy a new Boronia. I think that's probably the best way to do it. They don't like to be moved.
They don't like much,
And
especially the brown ones.
Yeah, and if you've got one growing in the garden, you've done really well.
Yep.
Yeah, gift it on.
Okay, Rena from Unknown would like to split a bird of paradise, which is in a large pot. And she wants to know when to do it and how. Really, you can't go that wrong. You pop it out of the pot. When I split bird of paradise, I use a straight edge shovel, so one of the rectangular heads.
Yep.
I use a grinder to put a sharp blade on it, and I just cut through them wherever I want to break them up into 2 or 3 or 4 plants. You can do it whenever you want, because they really don't care. They're super hardy. And then either plant it out in the garden or back into a fresh pot with fresh potting mix, and you'll be surprised how quickly it'll just reshoot and re-establish a root system and be good to go. They're so tough, the bird of paradise.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. Good luck with that, Rena. So Tyson, he's from Boronia in Victoria. Hi, Tyson. And he's asking, what are the essential tools for the home garden?
Chainsaw.
I do love a chainsaw. However, I think it's really essential to have a good pair of secateurs with a sharpening stone.
Yep.
Okay. I hate getting up a ladder now. I've fallen off a few ladders and I will not get up a ladder. So I have a long-handled pair of secateurs also.
Yep.
For pruning.
Yep, a pole pruner.
A pole pruner.
They're fantastic.
I love those. I think a good sharp shovel.
Yep.
Or spade.
Yep.
What do you call it? A spade or a shovel? You're the
I call it
landscaper.
spade. I call it shovel.
Yeah. Okay. I like the flat-edged spades or shovels. And yeah, that's. Oh, and I always have a pair of good gloves too.
Yeah, gloves and secateurs, I think, are the big ones.
Yeah.
Everyone needs those.
Yeah.
If you live in the hills, a chainsaw.
And a chainsaw if you live in the hills.
So Brianna, Mooney Ponds, has 2 apple trees, a Fuji and a Pink Lady, 9 to 10 years old, and wants to know when to prune them. She's never had fruit from the trees. Pruning won't help you get fruit, but you can prune them in winter, so late winter, and you can prune them again in summer once they've finished flowering. I'm just trying to think of Fuji and Pink Lady cross-pollinators.
Yes, they are.
So that shouldn't be the problem. So if the trees are growing well, it could just be an issue of not getting the right type of fertilizer when they're actively growing through the summer months. So, and I don't know, Mooney Ponds, you'd think they'd get enough chill hours there.
I would think so, yeah.
And just keeping the water up to them. Main trouble I have with my apples, they flower and then the possums come and eat all the flowers off them. So that's why I don't get fruit. But there's no good reason why you won't be getting fruit as long as you're keeping them well fed. So a good quality, complete fruit tree fertilizer, so they need all the trace elements, potash, all that sort of thing, and they really should flower and fruit for you, especially at 10 years old, definitely.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing that I would think of is if one of those trees had been mislabeled and therefore you don't have a pollinator.
You still should get some fruit.
You should get something.
Definitely.
Pink Lady is a partial self-pollinator, so you should. But you could always go down and get yourself something like a Granny Smith that's going to pollinate both of them.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Yeah.
Have 3 apples.
And maybe have 3 apples. So now we're off to Illawarra, and Murray is asking, do we have any tips on dealing with onion weed? Oh, that's a doozy of a question.
It's a horrible one.
It's a horrible thing. I think it takes patience. It's about digging them out. And look, I've read that some people use glyphosate to get rid of onion weed. I don't particularly like using glyphosate on onion weed.
It is reasonably effective on onion weed. It takes a while. There is a spray, and I just can't remember the name, that is specific for onion weed, but it's not selective. So if you spray a lawn with it or a garden and it hits other things, it'll kill that as well. And it's a lot stronger fungus herbicide than glyphosate. I just can't remember the name.
Does it start with A?
It may do.
I think it does. I was asked this question at the garden centre a few weeks ago, and I've been trying to find it.
If you go to a special, like an ag shop, so one of the agricultural, they will be able to supply you with it, but it is a pretty strong chemical. The best way I find it is you just have to dig them out and be consistent with it.
I'm actually doing a patch in my garden at the moment.
And get all the bulbs out.
Absolutely.
And don't let them flower.
Yeah, yes. So that's one thing. If you just go through, if you haven't been able to get onto them and you haven't been able to work with it, break the flower head off.
Yep.
And at least you're going to control them slightly. And if you do dig them out, be really careful that you get all the bulbs out.
And if you dig them out and you have someone you don't like, you go and drop them off in their gardens.
No, Darren, we don't do that sort of thing.
So Margaret in Belgrave, she has an orange peony rose that has never flowered. It's about 4 years old. Now, peony roses need a lot of chill to get them to flower. They like heavy soils and they need good fertilising when they're growing through the summer months and good watering. So I'm not sure with Belgrave as far as how cold it gets, but they do really need very, very cold weather to initiate flowering. They also need a lot of sun and, as I said, deep, rich soil. So as long as they're getting all those things, they should eventually flower, and they are absolutely amazing plants for them to flower. They would be one of the world's greatest flowering plants, peony roses.
Oh, they're so beautiful, aren't they? I wish we could grow them more over here. Do you grow them up when you're in the hills?
It's too cold. I've grown a tree peony and that did okay, but the peony roses, it's just way too hot for them in summer. They'll drop dead, which is a shame.
Yeah, such a shame. So we're off to Melbourne again, and Esther asked me has asked us, why don't all of my orchids bloom at the same time? It's kind of like asking why your children don't all grow at the same level, isn't it? You know, it's just the way they're living things, and they will bloom. They'll bloom in the same season, but they will bloom at different times.
Yeah, you got slightly different cultivars, slightly different species, and all those stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's it, Joe. That's it for the episode of Garden Gurus Lives. I'm sorry we didn't do all the questions we couldn't get to. Trevor will be back on Monday, first thing. Or actually, he'll be back on Tuesday, first thing, to answer any questions we didn't get to you. And Lachlan will send a message to all our seed winners after today's show.
Yeah. So the Garden Gurus is back on air. We're playing at different times around the country. So check your local TV guide to make sure that you don't miss us. Remember, we have a $20,000 garden makeover competition running in this season of the Garden Gurus, so don't forget to enter. We'll have the competition details up here on Facebook straight after the program.
And keep in mind, you can always jump onto our website and catch up on our previous stories from the Garden Gurus at thegardengurus.tv or YouTube channel thegardengurus.tv.
Trevor will be back next Tuesday for another session of Garden Gurus Live. Make sure you tune in at 12 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Happy gardening, everybody, and thanks for being with us.
If there is one question we get asked a lot here at the Garden Gurus, it's how about you come to my place and build a garden? We'll how about we do just that?
This show is brought to you by the Garden Gurus and Evergreen Garden Care. Evergreen Garden Care and their market-leading brands are some of the most trusted consumer brands within the garden care market. They produce high-quality garden care products designed to help people create their own green oasis. Whether it's a garden, a balcony, or potted indoor plants, they want to inspire anyone, anywhere to be able to easily create and maintain their own garden. To find out more about evergreen garden care, head to www.lovethegarden.com. Visit the Garden Guru's online store and browse through a collection of high-quality, German-made Wolfgarten tools. You'll also find a range of books with information to help create and maintain a beautiful garden. You can also access the online store on the Garden Guru's Facebook page.
If there is one question we get asked a lot here at the Garden Gurus, it's how about you come to my place and build a garden? Well, how about we do just that? Here's your chance to win an amazing $20,000 edible garden makeover. All you have to do is head to our Facebook page, like it, and share a photo of your garden and tell us in 25 words or less why a Garden Guru's edible garden could transform your life. Whilst online, check out our Instagram page for great garden inspiration. Good luck.